Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a monumental stack of sources, articles, personal notes, historical research, strip away the noise, and synthesize the crucial, insightful, and frankly surprising takeaways just for you.
Yeah, and today we're tackling something ambitious.
I'd say so. If you are preparing for a deep 5-year infiltration mission into the heart of the past, or maybe you're just hoping to understand the physics of fate, you're absolutely in the right place.
We're not just recounting history today. We're looking at the granular mechanics of trying to overthrow it. Our sources chronicle this extraordinary high-stakes mission of Jake Epping, who's operating under the alias George Amberson.
Right.
And he's using a fixed-point time portal, committing 5 years of his life to a single seismic goal, preventing the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963.
And our mission here is to trace that journey from its start in 2011 all the way back to its landing spot in 1958. We're going to dissect the bizarre logistics of this kind of travel, the relentless, almost aggressive resistance the past throws up against any change, and the big question: what happens when success leads directly to catastrophe?
Exactly. We have to analyze every strange detail, from the specific smell of the portal to the behavior of, supposedly telepathic bookies. It's all about understanding this concept of temporal tolerance.
Let's jump right into the rabbit hole.
So the whole operation kicks off because of a man who is desperately running out of time. Jake Epping is introduced to this guy, Al Templeton, the initial guardian of the secret.
And the sources describe Al with this painful, visceral clarity.
They do. He's suffering from severe metastasized cancer, which the material says has left him with the authentic tattoos of age. I mean, he's only 62. But his voice is so raspy, it's so close to just being a whisper. It's barely human.
And that urgency, that's the engine for the whole story, right? Al knows he can't survive the 5 years he'd need to wait between the portal's opening date and November 1963.
He can't. He needs a successor. He needs someone who is intelligent, unattached, divorced, no kids, and crucially, young enough and physically able to withstand the psychological and physical stress of what he calls the long game.
Al had the knowledge, but he needed Jake's timeline.
Exactly. And the tool for this mission is maybe the most understated and improbable time machine you could imagine. The portal, what they call the rabbit hole, it's housed in the storage room, the canvas, as the source notes.
Right, the French term for a ship's storeroom.
Yeah, of Al's Airstream trailer diner in Lisbon Falls, Maine.
So it's not, glowing or futuristic. It's just a dingy flight of stairs at the back that should lead to a basement, but it doesn't.
And the smell of this space is one of the most noted sensory details. It's this odd, not unpleasant mix of coffee, vegetables, and spices, but underneath all that, there's something else. Something indefinable, almost metaphysical, just clinging to the air.
The actual experience of going through it is so specific.
It's highly specialized. When he goes down those stairs, there's this distinct pressure change, a literal pop in his head.
Like in an airplane.
Exactly, like a rapid descent or driving over a mountain pass. And then he's immediately hit with a wave of heat and this powerful smell of sulfur.
And what's so technically fascinating to me is the visual paradox of it. Jake knows he can see his foot resting on the cracked, modern cement floor of the diner's storage room.
Right.
But then, in a blink, he simultaneously sees an image of his foot on a wooden step, bathed in 1958 sunlight. So his eyes are telling him he's in the present, on cracked cement, but his feet feel the riser of the portal step as he exits into the past.
It's a physical manifestation of being in two times at once, even for just a fraction of a second.
Which brings us to the first, and maybe the most critical technical rule of this whole thing, the fixed point rule.
Yes. Every single entry, without exception, lands you on the precise moment of September 9, 1958 at 11:58 a.m.
You can't adjust the dial. You can't pick your date. If your target is 1963, you just have to wait.
You have to live 5 years in the past before you can even attempt the mission.
And then there's the other big one, the Grand Reset rule.
Which is terrifying. It dictates the finality of the process. If Jake, or George, as he's known, returns to the present, to 2011, and then goes back through the portal,
everything is erased.
Everything. All previous changes are completely wiped out. The timeline reverts to its original unbroken state.
Al puts it so simply: every journey is the first journey. And that detail is the real emotional engine here. If Jake succeeds, if he saves JFK and then comes back to 2011 just for a quick check or to resupply,
he has to go back to 1958 and live the entire 5 years all over again?
Everything he did, everyone he met, gone. The stakes for that one single 5-year trip become almost impossibly high.
So Al has to prepare him for this. He gives him the necessary cover identity, George T. Amberson. It comes with a social security card, SSN 0055202223, a name they conveniently borrowed from a tombstone.
A little gallows humor there.
A little bit, yeah. And of course, a big pile of period-appropriate cash, including those massive Grover Cleveland $20 bills, just to make sure he can blend in economically.
Okay, so let's talk about the immediate environment right around that portal, because this is where Time's tenacity first really shows itself.
It is. The moment Jake arrives, the sequence of events immediately following his exit from the portal is always precisely the same. Al describes it as being like rewatching the same film.
Yeah, the sources detailed this little micro loop.
Frank Anicetti Jr. always enters the diner from the Chevron garage. He's talking about Titus working on the truck lift, and then he's followed immediately by Mrs. Simmons and her friends coming in to pick out some fruit.
Every single time.
Every time. This recurring loop is the first sign that the past can self-correct.
And Al confirms this paradox. He says he bought the same meat week after week, and he talked to this 17-year-old kid, Frank Anicetti, dozens of times. But for Frank, every single meeting was the first time.
Exactly. The past is fixed and cyclical right in the immediate vicinity of the portal. It doesn't just resist change. It seems to reset itself on a micro level to stop the time traveler from gaining any meaningful advantage right at the source.
So it has this localized, high-definition defense system at the portal entrance.
It seems to. It makes sure that any attempt to use the entrance as, a revolving door for minor changes is immediately negated. It forces the time traveler to commit to the long-term far-field mission if they want to cause any real structural change.
Okay, let's unpack this a little.
Yeah.
We're going to see later that the past tolerates localized murder,
Right.
but it instantly resets these tiny interactions at the entrance. So the tension really lies in finding the threshold. What's the limit of temporal tolerance? Is the past consciously malevolent, or is this just the chaotic, aggressive physics of a system trying to keep its own structural integrity?
That is the central question of the entire mission.
So before Jake could risk 5 years of his life and, the integrity of the universe for a huge event like saving JFK, he needed a moral grounding, a justification that was deeply personal.
And that came from the story of Harry Dunning.
Harry was the high school janitor in Jake's contemporary life in 2011, and he wrote this incredibly poignant essay about his family's murder. It's described as primitive art, but powerful and true.
And this essay detailing this horrific Thanksgiving attack by his father, that was Jake's immediate emotional motivation. He saw Harry's radiant, gap-toothed smile at graduation, and he just realized the man who wrote that essay should never have had to exist in that broken form.
But Al had already learned the hard way that even small, successful changes were often just erased by that grand reset rule.
Right, his own test case. He tried to save a woman named Carolyn Poulin from a crippling accident, and he found that even if he saved her legs, her life remained ordinary in the grand scheme of things.
The sources seem to imply that changes affecting really immediate family dynamics, like marriage or children, were necessary to truly test that butterfly effect.
Exactly. So the goal had to be big enough to generate a real, measurable ripple, but localized enough that it wouldn't immediately collapse the whole timeline.
And saving the Dunning family, by neutralizing the abusive father Frank Dunning, that fit the bill perfectly.
It was a practice run for the big mission. It was a chance to test the past's resilience on a smaller, more contained scale.
So the first hurdle is just establishing an identity in, conservative 1958 Maine.
Yeah, and that was a logistical nightmare right from the start. He realizes immediately that his 2011 appearance, the longer hair, the modern clothes, just makes him stand out like an alien in an imperfect human disguise. He has to adapt or fail on day one.
So he ditches the modern clothes, he gets a haircut where the nape of his neck is shaved high.
He has to. He notes that long hair was basically reserved for rockabilly Mectons, who might call him Daddy-O, which is not the image he was going for as a serious operative.
No. He needed to disappear into the mundane fabric of the late 50s.
And the sources have these fascinating economic details that really punctuate this adjustment period. Root beer, or baye, as the Maine locals apparently pronounced it, cost 10 cents.
10 cents.
Yeah.
And he bought a Colt .38 special police revolver, the classic police special, for a shockingly low $9.99.
It's an incredible detail, and it stands in such sharp contrast to the cost of Oswald's mail-order rifle later on. It just highlights the accessibility of violence in that era.
He also has to navigate the financial differences. Banking was all done by hand, with ledgers at the hometown trust.
Cash was king. And these thrifty Yankees, as he calls them, they viewed credit cards with intense suspicion. So Jake had to be really careful with his Grover Cleveland 20s, making sure he spent them in the right places to avoid drawing the wrong kind of attention.
And his mission takes him to Derry, Maine, a town that Jake describes with this chilling detail as the little town that was strange.
He talks about the industrial fumes that just hung in the air, making the place feel like a dead whore on a church bench.
Which is a profoundly disturbing metaphor.
It is, and it speaks not just to the pollution, but to the psychic atmosphere of the town. People were cold, they were reserved, and they were instantly suspicious of strangers, which just amplified Jake's feeling of being an outsider.
Okay, so we finally get to the confrontation with the target, Frank Dunning, on Halloween night, 1958.
And the sources paint Frank as this locally popular jokester when he's sober, but he's prone to this terrible, almost animalistic rage when he's fueled by alcohol. He had a history of violence, and he'd managed to avoid military service, possibly due to flat feet or a heart murmur.
Jake's plan is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Confront Dunning and kill him in self-defense.
Yeah.
That saves the family and it tests the temporal limits. He gets to the house, he's ready to act. The scene is just chaos.
Future.
The Frankenstein mask, the kitchen setting, Dunning coming at him with an iron mace.
But this is where the past really shows its hand. It resists Jake directly and physically. He finds himself unable to deliver the fatal blow himself.
So the past has a specific defense mechanism against direct intervention by the time traveler in what it considers a major causal event.
It seems so, because instead, causality is completely redirected through an internal force. This secondary character, Bill Turcotte, shows up out of nowhere.
And Turcotte has his own motivation. He's got this long-standing personal hatred for Dunning, who had abandoned Turcotte's injured friend Chazzy after a fight.
So Turcotte is the one who fatally stabs Frank Dunning with a bayonet. He preserves the event's outcome. Dunning still dies,
Right.
But the primary agent of change, Jake, is thwarted.
And the past, it makes sure there are no loose ends. Immediately after killing Dunning, Turcotte just collapses and dies instantly from a heart attack.
The agent that the past used for its self-correction is instantly removed from the timeline. It's almost like a piece of malware that executes and then deletes itself.
So Jake goes to check the results. The sources say he searches the Derry Daily News archives for November 1st, 1958. Local atrocities weren't front-page news back then, so he finds this small article, 2 deaths following a family drama, buried on page 12.
And the story is different. Frank Dunning still killed his wife, Doris, and one son, Arthur, but he was stopped by the heroic Bill Turcotte.
Yeah, we can trace the butterfly effect from there. Jake calls the phone company. Ellen Dunning, the daughter, is now a successful radio host. The other son, Troy, is living a good life in Palm Springs.
And most critically, the former janitor, Harry Dunning, no longer exists in that broken state of life that prompted the original mission. The past accepted the localized change, but only after violently resisting Jake's direct involvement and using its own internal mechanism to get the outcome while neutralizing the new agent.
So if we look at this analytically, the past seems to be elastic, not brittle. You can pull on it, that's Jake's intent, and it'll try to snap back to maintain its structure.
But if you introduce enough localized force, like Turcotte's intense personal history with Dunning, the past will grudgingly accept the change. But it consumes the agent of change in the process to maintain its equilibrium.
And that's the first crucial lesson on temporal tolerance.
Absolutely. But the Dunning episode only brought Jake to late 1958. Now he's facing the truly grueling part of the mission, the 5-year wait until November 1963.
He needs to survive and blend in without attracting attention or needing constant work.
So to finance this long game, he uses his greatest advantage, future knowledge. He starts placing large strategic sports bets on specific, historically tight outcomes.
The sources mention him betting heavily on the Yankees winning the World Series after being down 3-1, a move that generates immediate massive profit with a pretty minimal initial investment.
So we see the past tolerates a localized murder. But what happens when Jake starts betting against destiny? Weaponizing future knowledge for profit.
It attracts immediate unwanted attention. His luck is just, it's unnatural.
The sources really detail Jake's increasing paranoia as the bookies get more and more suspicious. There's this one interaction with a guy named Frank Fraude that really stands out. Fraude is just utterly unnerved by George Amberson's consistent, impossible luck, and he calls him a zozo telepathe.
A telepathic weirdo.
A telepathic weirdo, yeah. And that linguistic detail, it adds so much texture. It shows that Jake is becoming known as this strange, almost supernatural figure in that world.
And abusing future knowledge like this has severe material consequences. It's not just a metaphysical problem.
Not at all. It eventually culminates in a Tampa bookie named Gutierrez burning down Amberson's house in retaliation for his unnatural consistency. The past isn't just resisting in some abstract way. It's using human agents, driven by greed and suspicion, to physically attack the time traveler and disrupt his entire base of operations.
So after dealing with all that financial chaos, Jake implements his long-term surveillance plan. He moves to Fort Worth to monitor Lee Harvey Oswald.
He's constantly revising his cover story. Eventually, he settles on being a writer, George Amberson, who's researching a novel called The Murderous City.
Which conveniently requires him to commute between Dallas and Fort Worth to gather material.
Exactly. He moves into this grim area, West Neely Street and Mercedes Street, right next to the Oswald family. And his surveillance setup was both ingenious and, well, incredibly intrusive.
The bugged lamp.
The bugged lamp. He installs it in an adjacent unrented apartment, which allows him to listen in on all the intimate, chaotic details of Oswald's family life.
And the sources provide this intimate and, frankly, devastating portrait of LHO based on these recordings.
They really do. He's depicted as constantly irritable, argumentative, physically weak, white as a fish, is the quote. He's prone to this passive-aggressive behavior and these cycles of sudden, temporary apologies to his wife, Marina, which are then followed almost immediately by renewed rage.
The material really emphasizes his pathetic intellectual vanity.
It does. We hear him lecturing a grit salesman, citing Karl Marx to try and impress a man who only wants to sell him some cheap household pamphlets.
It's a picture of a small, unstable man who's just desperate for ideological validation and attention.
And that's what makes him a demonic ghost for America. It's not some inherent evil, it's that he was a vacuum for rage and misplaced ambition.
And crucially, the monitoring captured these external influences that really cemented his path.
Yes, his interactions with George de Mohrenschildt, this white Russian emigre who seems to treat Oswald like a kind of pet project. Mohrenschildt is described as giving LHO money and advice, encouraging him to return what you take now 100-fold later.
And this connects Oswald's personal ideology to the broader political climate of the time.
Absolutely. Mohrenschildt discusses figures like General Edwin Walker and Air Force Chief Curtis LeMay, and that links LHO's own communist leanings and his isolationist rage to the segregationist anti-communist fear that was just permeating American society.
So this isn't a lone nut. This is a vacuum being influenced by the extremes of the era from both the left and the right.
Exactly. But despite the success of the Dunning test and this meticulous surveillance, the 5-year mission takes a brutal, severe physical toll on Jake. And this is the direct physical manifestation of the past fighting back.
He suffers from this debilitating, recurring digestive illness, gastrointestinal issues, and these chronic flu-like symptoms. This isn't just stress.
No, the sources present it as a biological attack. It mirrors Al Templeton's terminal suffering.
Al had described the feeling of the past resisting change, like trying to pull his head out of a nylon stocking.
And Jake felt that resistance on a biological level. It's this constant wearing down illness that suggests the physical price for disrupting destiny is measured in sickness and fatigue. He's literally being rejected by the time stream he's inhabiting.
And this physical toll is accompanied by this mysterious auditory phenomenon, the harmonic buzz.
Right. It's this recurrent sound, a carillon or a high-frequency harmonic, that Jake starts to associate with the portal location, and once, very notably, with this strange two-tone Plymouth Fury that appeared near the rabbit hole back in 1958.
Which raises an important question. Is the harmonic buzz just some auditory feedback, or is it a resonance signal indicating temporal structural stress?
Well, the protagonist himself speculates that understanding this sound might be the key to understanding the mechanism of time itself. He wonders if the escalating severity of the changes he's attempting results in increased harmonic vibrations, the past literally rattling itself back into its preferred state.
The deeper he digs, the louder the universe screams.
I think that's a good way to put it. The past isn't resisting passively, it's actively trying to incapacitate or kill him over the long run, and the harmonic buzz could be the sound of the entire timeline's infrastructure just creaking under the strain of his presence.
So to survive this 5-year, this grind, Jake needed a respite. He needed a place of stability.
And he found this peace and acceptance in this small, unassuming town called Jody, Texas. He gets a job teaching at Denholm High, despite his, completely fraudulent credentials.
Jody feels like a genuine home. It smells of
Yeah.
wild sagebrush, which is this sharp contrast to the alienated, suspicious environment of Derry and the grimness of West Neely Street in Fort Worth.
The sources really emphasize that this is where Jake finally allows himself to become human again. He sheds that detached operative persona.
And it's here he meets Sadie Dunhill, the high school librarian, who quickly becomes the sole emotional center of his entire existence.
And she is immediately portrayed as highly intelligent and observant. She notes his conflicting biographical details, his suspicious New England accent, the Florida license plates, his contradictory stories. But she chooses to believe in the integrity of the man she sees, not the details on his paper trail.
And Sadie is dealing with her own past trauma, this unstable, abusive marriage to a man named Johnny Clayton.
Clayton is a paranoid figure. He's obsessed with the fear of nuclear war, which leads him to refuse to have children, convinced the world is just destined to explode. And this fear is what drives his abusive behavior.
So the relationship, of course, inevitably runs into conflict with the resistance of the past.
Of course. The critical turning point comes when Sadie's abusive ex-husband, Johnny Clayton, tracks her down. The past seems to use the existing flaw in Sadie's life, Clayton's instability, as a direct weapon against Jake's happiness.
Clayton, just fueled by his paranoia and rage, he attacks Sadie with a knife. He lacerates her face and barely misses her eye.
Jake is able to intervene and stop him. Clayton subsequently commits suicide, but the damage is profound. Sadie needs this expensive, complex reconstructive surgery, which is funded partly by the local community and whatever is left of Jake's cash reserves.
And in the terrifying aftermath of that attack, Sadie forces Jake to reveal his deep secret.
He tells her everything. The truth, that he's a time traveler from 2011. He details his foreknowledge of events like the Cuban Missile Crisis outcome and the Yankees' past World Series win. And this shared secret, it binds them completely. It permanently involves Sadie in the mission.
And the sources capture the brutal emotional cost of that impending Grand Reset rule. Jake realizes he has to leave Sadie to complete the mission, knowing that his eventual return to 2011 to trigger the reset will erase their 5 years together, their love, their life in Jody.
And even the traumatic attack that almost killed her.
He finds this choice sickening and brutal. He's committed to this global, world-saving goal, but to succeed, he has to commit a deeply personal annihilation. He has to erase the most meaningful personal connection he has ever formed.
And his commitment to Sadie, ironically, is what makes his mission exponentially harder because the past seems to fight the hardest when he finds any happiness.
Yeah, this emotional arc is so critical. His personal bond with Sadie becomes his greatest temporal obstacle. He notes his injured leg, which he got in a separate run-in with the bookies, and he tells himself he can't become any more addicted to life in Jody than he already is. He has to put his relationship with Sadie in suspension to protect the future. It's a violent clash between personal commitment and historical commitment.
And so the date finally arrives. November 2010, 1963. Jake Epping, now accompanied by Sadie, is racing toward the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas.
And the past, realizing the time traveler is about to strike at its unwavering point, just escalates its defense mechanisms from chronic illness to aggressive physical malice.
This isn't just bad luck. This is the past actively trying to physically kill or delay them. The journey is this series of escalating temporal attacks. First, their car fails violently. The wheel just detaches, leaving the car stranded.
Which traps his essential supplies, his cash, and the Colt pistol inside.
They manage to commandeer a bus, but it immediately crashes into a city works truck, releasing the suffocating smell of burning tar. And Jake's already injured leg gets hurt again, causing this intense, debilitating pain.
The past is targeting his existing weaknesses.
It seems to be. And we see the dynamic shift as the past malice forces them into desperate action. Sadie, who is now fully aware of the stakes and the imminent catastrophe, she pulls a knife, which is a shocking, decisive move on a cowboy to commandeer his Studebaker so they can continue the mission.
A bystander even yells, "Do her party, madam!"
It's a telling moment. The past has forced Sadie, who is the moral anchor of the story, into an act of violence just to survive its resistance.
So this is a critical analytical point. Why is the past's resistance suddenly so physical and localized? It derailed a car, it crashed a bus.
It suggests that the closer Jake gets to that fixed point, JFK's death, the more conscious and malevolent the resistance becomes. It moves beyond just mere chaos and into active, targeted sabotage.
So finally, Jake breaks into the Texas Schoolbook Depository and reaches the 5th floor.
And the sources provide this chilling, eerie description. Stacked boxes everywhere, beams of light cutting through the sawdust, and absolute silence. It's a scene of history frozen, just moments before its irreversible execution.
When Lee Harvey Oswald enters, Jake observes this crucial, metaphysical transformation.
He does. LHO shifts immediately from the ordinary, flawed, pathetic man he'd been monitoring for 5 years into a demonic ghost that will haunt America. It's as if the historical role itself possesses the unstable host.
The intervention is successful. Jake cries out, which alerts Oswald, and the first shot is fired, but he misses JFK. The mission is technically complete. Kennedy is safe.
But the past still extracts a heavy final price. Jake is severely wounded in the leg, suggesting the physical defense of destiny is violent and intensely personal right up to the last second.
Kennedy is safe. The presidential motorcade speeds away toward Austin. Jake is immediately treated by a Dr. Perry, who previously only knew him as George, but now addresses him with respect to Mr. Amberson, and he's questioned by Dallas Police Captain Will Fritz and FBI agent James Hosty.
And his cover story holds up. He was an author researching a novel, living in cheap areas to save money, and he started worrying when he saw the motorcade route passing the depository.
He's hailed as a hero.
The irony is just immense. He's being celebrated for an act that he knows has jeopardized the entire global system. He even gets a personal phone call of thanks from Jackie Kennedy, which cements his role as the world's savior.
But the immediate relief is tempered by this temporal dread.
It is. As he's being treated, he realizes the past's struggle isn't over. He starts wondering if it will simply correct the situation in another way. A heart attack for Kennedy, maybe an Air Force One crash, or another shooter taking the successful shot later.
And he concludes, what would happen to Kennedy from now on was no longer my responsibility.
He's done his part to disrupt the fixed point, but he knows the consequences are now entirely unpredictable.
So the moment of truth arrives. Having successfully prevented the fixed point, Jake immediately returns to 2011 through the portal to check the consequences of his 5 years of effort.
And he steps out into Lisbon Falls and is just hit by this overwhelming sense of dread. Al Templeton's trailer is gone. It's been replaced by a charred foundation. That's the first ominous sign.
He steps out into a completely apocalyptic new reality. Lisbon Falls is drastically altered. It's ruined. The town is marked by violence, decay, swastikas, and this crude graffiti screaming, "Jew rat!"
And the sources note that the lights burning behind drawn curtains are not electric. They're Coleman lanterns or oil lamps. The infrastructure has completely collapsed.
And he finds Harry Dunning. But this version is a crippled elderly man radiating menace and pain.
And this new Harry Dunning explains the drastically altered history under President Kennedy, who in this timeline won 2 full terms.
The new timeline is a nightmare. It suggests the past resistance didn't fail, it just detonated on a global scale.
Exactly. Kennedy struggles with intense, widespread race riots throughout his 2 terms. The stability that Kennedy supposedly provided inadvertently removed a necessary pressure valve for civil unrest.
And here's the shocking detail. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated in Chicago. Not by a lone figure, but by a corrupt FBI agent named Dwight Hawley, operating under J. Edgar Hoover's direct command.
Which triggered even wider, more destructive city riots than occurred in the original timeline. The Vietnam War outcome also changed dramatically, with Saigon falling much earlier to the North Vietnamese.
Global terrorism escalated exponentially.
And there's a specific detail that highlights the cultural devastation. A suicide bombing hits a Beatles reunion concert, killing 300 people and blinding Paul McCartney.
The message is just so clear. The changes targeted not just political stability, but cultural joy and progress.
And then the ultimate catastrophic blow. The collapse of Russia led to nuclear weapons being sold to terror groups, including an ominous one called the Base.
And Harry Dunning explains that the final straw was a massive reactor explosion in Vermont in 1999, which irradiated all of New England and Quebec, causing the vast infrastructural collapse he now lives in.
So the verdict is terrifying. The past's violent self-correction mechanisms didn't just target Kennedy, they destabilized the entire global system. Removing that single fixed point, JFK's death, caused the whole structure to collapse on a global scale, generating a far worse nuclear-threatened chaos.
The harmonic buzz he heard had finally realized itself in a catastrophic resonance across the entire world.
So Jake realizes his only brutal option is to initiate a total reset. He has to use the portal again, erasing all 5 years of his life, the saved Kennedy, and the terrible future they caused.
He has to accept the original terrible history to save the world from this new, worse disaster.
But before he does, he executes one final, deeply personal and defining act. He can't leave Sadie Dunhill's life just erased without any closure.
He knows his immediate return to the 2011 portal will erase every memory, every kiss, every shared word.
So he uses the reset opportunity to return to September 9, 1958 for one final brief visit. He sees Sadie, innocent and whole, and he dances with her. It's this emotional farewell that she will never remember.
And then he leaves again, ensuring his influence is completely removed from her timeline, thereby preventing her tragic involvement with him and the attack by Clayton.
He performs the final, ultimate reset and returns to the original, restored 2011 timeline. He searches the archives for Sadie Dunhill.
And she was still severely injured by Johnny Clayton, who still committed suicide. But she was saved by the timely arrival of the principal, Deke Simmons, and Ellie Doherty.
She went on to become a highly respected figure, the town's citizen of the century, still bearing the visible scar from the attack. And the protagonist notes that the scar is beautiful to the eye of love.
So the past, when left alone, provided a difficult but ultimately positive, community-supported future for Sadie. It demonstrated a resilience outside of his grand world-saving narrative.
And that final check provides the ultimate insight. Jake's success wasn't in altering history, but in ensuring his interference was fully undone, allowing the person he loved to achieve a stable, dignified life in the original flawed timeline.
So what does this all mean for us? The paradox at the heart of this deep dive is devastatingly clear. The greatest good imaginable, saving a beloved president, led directly to the greatest global evil, this nuclear terror-driven chaos.
The powerful lesson embedded in this narrative is that the past is not a malleable substance or, a blank canvas. It's a massive interconnected system, a web of causality that aggressively resists fundamental changes to its major institutions or fixed events, like the JFK assassination.
Right.
So while local changes might be tolerated under duress, attempting a global structural change leads to these catastrophic, unpredictable, harmonic reactions. The universe essentially tries to destroy itself to correct the mistake.
The true triumph of the 5-year mission wasn't saving Kennedy. It was the simple, profound act of recognizing the value of a single meaningful connection, Sadie Dunhill, and then having the moral courage to sacrifice the grand, world-saving ambition just to ensure her simple, non-catastrophic existence was restored.
Which raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. If history or fate is so intensely tenacious and so aggressively resistant to change, what truly defines a meaningful life? Is it the pursuit of a grand, world-saving effort that risks destroying everything? Or is it the small, simple acts of love and protection committed faithfully in the present moment within the constraints of the time we are given?